All right, should be live, I guess. I have to go through the routine of seeing if it's working. Yeah. Chrome. Where the hell is Chrome? Chrome. There it is. I have to open this and see how if the volume is working and such. Yeah. Yeah, it appears to be okay. Chrome. That's me. Chrome. All right. So seems to be working. So I have to move this over here so I can see the stupid chat thing, and then this has to go smaller so I can see that. And all right, so anyway, usual routine. If somebody would like to join the room and have a conversation about physics, you know, I'll send you the link to the room, but you have to ask for it and such. And yeah, that's pretty much how it works. You have to ask because of trolls and such. So let me just get the link so I have it in case I need it. Probably won't because nobody ever wants to do that. All right. So, yeah, what's the subject? Unification is the general subject. And so I didn't really plan anything. So you know, life, busy, all that kind of stuff. Should have had a I should have sucked on some nicotine before I started too. Anyway, yeah. So there's so much of physics. You know, logically, you'd say all the forces have so much in common. The inverse square law and the speed of light, which is the really big one. Um, why would they all move at the same speed if they aren't made of the same thing? Gravity and magnetism, especially. And yet physics is perfectly comfortable having created really different mechanisms to explain forces, things moving into other things. And it just seems kind of obvious that if you're going to say bent space moves planets towards the sun, and then you're going to say there's some sort of virtual photon thing. See, that's the part that's so obvious. They really don't have a mechanism for what moves um, magnets. They just have a vague notion of something. Like I said, all you get is a description of something like a virtual photon. That's what Feynman would say. Um, not a real thing, some kind of thing they don't know what it is, and it behaves like uh, the same way gravity behaves, in the sense it behaves like a force that actually pushes something. Um, or the inverse looks like a pull when it's you know well, anyway, so Mach gravity covers gravity, so you can turn that into a particle force and it works. It has one little flaw, which is a drag problem, but it fits every other way, and it would fit for magnets too. Um, as long as you have to have an explanation for the charge part. And so those two things are really close, and yet conventional physics doesn't feel any need to try to combine them to do any work on it at all. They're just completely happy with um, a model that seems fundamentally that it can't be right because it sort of excludes the possibility of unification. And it sort of pointed out that it excludes it in the sense that Einstein couldn't think of it, Feynman couldn't think of it. Nobody could think of a way of combining the idea of bent space time and magnets. And, and there's nothing in common in the sense there's no way to you know talk about it in some sense where there's any proportionality. You can't say that magnets are bending space because the force isn't strong enough to do that in a sense, even though it's a stronger force. um, well, they certainly don't quantize. They don't reduce to anything similar, and therefore the math doesn't connect the two at all. I guess that's the more important point, is you can't connect them mathematically. Should see if there's any chat shit here, but there's usually never is. So I guess I might as well leave it open in case somebody posts something in there. All right, so yeah, so people argue as if this has been, as if a lot of work went into um, recognizing what are the basic experiments in physics, the fundamental stuff like charging, um, you know, rubber rods and pieces of paper, and and then all the electrical stuff, and combining those simple experiments that illustrate something, and then recognizing that just the basic mechanics of gravity, which are simpler, because you don't have the plus and minus problem. Um, but it's like no effort at all spent to sit there and just say, well, let's go back to the basic facts, and instead of being stuck with the evolution of the ideas as it goes from Rutherford to Maxwell and all the other characters in history. That progression, it doesn't have any context. So, the wrong conclusions don't become obvious. And it's only in hindsight that you can see where something was a mistake. And, I'd argue that if physics was willing to do that hindsight thing, they could see that um, a lot of this stuff was assumed to be true, like the model of the atom with the orbiting electrons, um, the assumptions of the gravity moving photons. Um, the Eddington experiment is the famous one, made Einstein a household name. Yet it's an experiment that can't be duplicated, and even if you look at the way the math is, it's got two rigs in it, two complete, um, kind of out on a limb assumptions built into it. First, that the inverse square of the law doesn't apply to photons somehow, and that, another somehow, because photons are time dilated, they can think they're in the gravity twice as long, and therefore they somehow are in the gravity twice as long because they think they are, because they have the perception that they are. Um, so, two huge would be considered glaring errors if people recognized that there wasn't any gravitational lensing, that photons aren't actually moved by gravity. Once, let's say, that fact is established, it's going to be really obvious where the mistake was made in these early assumptions that everybody thought were the truth. That somehow this makes sense, that you can time dilate something and essentially break the laws of physics, in the sense that you can say that it's not only that its clock is wrong, it actually does experience more impacts from whatever the force of gravity would be, merely because it thinks, it perceives wrong. So, I mean, they're fundamentally logical errors, and they should give people pause and reason to say, well, yeah, maybe they've made a mistake, because these errors um, aren't meaningless. They're an indication of some reason to doubt. They're, you know, make it reasonable to say, wait a minute, what if? At least they give you at least reason to say what if, and then examine the evidence. And once you start examining the evidence of gravitational lensing, you see that it is kind of wanting, that it doesn't fit any good model. The math doesn't work in a lot of cases. And so, there's another good reason to doubt it. So whether you come from it understanding the theoretical problems, that is, no inverse square law applied, and somehow using time dilation as a way to make twice as much force, or you can look at it from the evidence, which is all the lensing images don't make much sense mathematically. The gravity moves the wrong way. It gets stronger as you go closer to the center, which is backwards from a lens anyway. And that's another reason to doubt it. And the gravity be so weak in these locations that they're supposed to be lensing that there couldn't possibly be lensing in those places. And that's ignored also. You know, nobody's typing anything. I guess 8:30 isn't a good time, I guess. Yeah, so I wasn't, I didn't prepare a speech in case there was nobody participating. So I should have been more ready for that. Um, I mean, I was going to do a Ken Wheeler video just because his last video was so stupid. But anyway, all right. So what else can you say about unification? Clearly, there's a huge connection between the strong nuclear force and the weak nuclear force, which they're saying are two different forces, but whatever, it doesn't really matter. And magnetism. And clearly, there's a strong connection between magnetism and gravity. Um, and electricity is just a byproduct of charge or magnetism. And charge and magnetism are the same thing essentially. One is a definition of what the filter is, and one of them's a definition of what the consequence of making a filter is. And it really just has to do with the strength of the filter. In the case of electricity, the um, the the magnetic effect is very weak. Unless you deliberately, wind wires around something or do something to multiply it. It's a pretty weak force because it just has to do with the surface of the object becoming a filter, essentially, because you've pressurized electrons. You've um, created a density of them. And so now they're filtering um, the gravity, the force, the basic bit. Um, and so now it's creating some magnetism. And, but it does get a little bit complicated just because there is a subtle difference between charge, which is the surface voltage, and the something like a magnet, which is essentially has the same effect but without charge, in the sense that the there's a segregation of electrons and protons that are allowing for there to be a filtering process, but the segregation is on the atomic level, inside the magnet, and it's not on the surface. So there's a big difference between something created on surface and something that's throughout the entire mass of an object. So something I've often said when I talk about the magnet is that the charge is, that the effect, filters all. It doesn't filter all. Obviously, you can have different degrees of magnetic potency or strength, depending on um, um, how you chemically make the magnet, and then how you impose the magnetism. You can do it with greater purity or lesser purity, but even a perfect magnet that we could make is probably not nearly as magnetic as it would be if you could create the magnet in a sterile, perfect environment, so that every single atom was perfectly aligned. So there's probably still a great deal of misalignment in a common magnet created through common practices. Probably. So, yeah. See if there's anything else. Yes, it really makes a big difference, I guess, time-wise. It's too early, I guess, in California or something. So just be good for noticing what time is the best time. This clearly isn't a good time. And such. Yeah, so so maybe I'll cut it short just because I didn't plan a whole video. Not that I need to plan one, but this will all just be kind of wasted space. I guess I could just close the room and reopen another one. And then I could just delete this one. But then I would have done all that talking for nothing. Something else I could do. Let's see. It'd be nice if you could pause it. Yeah, just pause the live room and see if anybody else shows up. Anyway, what's your gripe with quantum? Again, my gripe isn't with quantum. Okay, so you added mechanics. I don't even, when they originally called it quantum electrodynamics, and that all made sense in a sense that they were recognizing that there's this, the Einstein thing, the photoelectric effect, the idea that there was this discrete little bit of energy that was being transferred, and then that's what was making that's what was carrying the force. There was a force carrier. And when they turned it into quantum mechanics, then it got into all this wave crap, okay, and interference patterns and all of this nonsense. And that's the part I totally reject. I don't think there are any waves because there's no medium. So there's no waves. It's just rays of force. And obviously, you can turn force on and off. You can do different things to create on off patterns, obviously, that don't involve anything like wave interference. So the the pattern they say is an interference pattern, as I pointed out, is just an on-off pattern. It's the simplest pattern you could possibly create is on-off at a regular cycle. So clearly, photons have a built-in frequency. I'd argue clearly electrons have a built-in distance from each other. They always balance pressure between them. So if there's 500 electrons on the surface of a slit, for example, those 500 electrons are connected to each other kind of intimately. So whatever the distances are between them and the pressure between them, they'll always balance that pressure. So if there's more pressure between two electrons over here, that pressure will be spread over all the rest of the electrons. So clearly the distance between the electrons and the frequency of the light are, that is the distance between the little tons that make up the photon, clearly those two things have a frequency, and that frequency can cause interference in the sense of can cause places where it would be on and off. And you don't need wave theory to explain the phenomenon at all because there are no waves, because the forces don't spread, the forces don't dilute, the forces don't do any of that stuff. The only thing they obey is the inverse square law, which is perfectly illustrated by something like a light bulb, which clearly is sending out rays of light, not waves of light. So, so yes, quantum mechanics, I don't have any disagreement with the idea that the universe is made of quanta, little bits of force that are, I think, clearly illustrated in photons in the sense that the energy is always the same. It always blah, 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 So that's all very consistent. And the only thing I'm disagreeing about quantum mechanics is this idiotic notion that there's an ether or a medium called a electric field or magnetic field. There's no field. The field is created when there is a change in the dynamic of the energy where it's polarized. When you polarize it, it's different than when it's unpolarized. A magnet polarizes the field. It doesn't create a new field. It just changes the existing field into one that's polarized. And that's the difference. But there's no waves in the field. Do we not account for environment's possible effect on photons in these experiments? Well, there's no environment that can affect a photon. So photons are only affected by electrons. They have to hit an electron. Otherwise, a photon goes perfectly straight. It goes from point A to point B in a straight line at the speed of light until it hits an electron. That's it. Or a proton. That's it. It has to hit a matter bit, or it's unaffectable. You can't change its course in any way except to collect it. An electron has to actually collect it and readmit it. There's no other way. All right, what do you think of superfluid vacuum theory? Well, I don't know what it is, but I'm sure it's stupid. It sounds stupid. So yeah, I have no opinion because I don't know what it is, but I'm sure it's nothing but silly shit. Um, so again, I'd argue that Einstein knew unification was the only rational way to have a rational universe. You know, to have something that's reductive and goes down to the scratch part. And and it's just perfectly logical. It has to get simpler. It has to go down to some basic unit. And unfortunately, you know he was the same asshole who presented a huge obstacle to unification, which was this invented nonsense of some bent space time thing that has an infinite amount of energy. And all you have to do is pile matter together, and you have infinite energy somehow created by that process. When clearly the energy has to come from the universe somewhere, it can't come from nothing. The sun doesn't burn any energy, the earth doesn't burn any energy. Where's the fuel that moves the earth into the sun? I mean, it's a clear problem. It should be reason for everybody to doubt that it's the right answer because there's no explanation for where the energy comes from. And the same problem with magnetism because they don't realize the energy is being made out of polarizing the field energy, that is strengthening it by segregating it, as positive and negative, that's what makes it stronger. It has no strength when it's mixed because it's going yin yang. The mixed force is yin yang. It's plus minus plus minus plus minus. It can't do anything. But if you separate the yin from the yang, okay, then you can do something with it. Then it has the appearance of energy. And neither thing do they have a theory of energy. They don't explain why magnets move together. They don't explain where the energy comes from, and they don't explain where the energy comes from to move Earths into suns. And those are huge gaps, just gigantic gaps. What about holographic theory? Well, again, it's just bullshit. I mean, you even go watch what's his face at Stanford talk this crap, and it's just crap. It's not made out of anything real. It's just imaginary nonsense. It's mathematical tricks. There's nothing real in it. What's the matter that makes up the magnetic field? That the field is made out of, yes, Susskind. Yes, the field is made out of the force that exists in the universe. So you haven't obviously watched any of my videos. So you have to watch my videos to understand my theory. So watch the overview videos. There's a playlist, or watch the Start Here video. But clearly, all the energy comes from the external field, the same place the cosmic background radiation comes from. There's a huge amount of un there's a huge amount of quanta that doesn't have a frequency. So it's not coming at a frequency. It doesn't affect electrons in a way to kick them out of their orbits, so we can't detect them. But that energy, when segregated, when polarized, that is positive and negative, it comes in two forms: plus energy, minus energy, electron energy, proton energy, however you want to identify it. And when that's segregated, that energy becomes very effective at moving things together, or pushing things into each other, or pushing things apart. Because the electron force reflects off electrons, the proton force reflects off of protons. That means when it traps between those things, it can create a great deal of pressure. All you need to do to create extra voltage is to move two electrons closer together, and the pressure between them is the voltage, and it will create higher frequency photons. And that's how you make X-rays and blah 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 blah. But yeah, you really have to. Um, the fields are made of quanta of energy, little bits moving the speed of light. When the little bits are at a frequency, we call them the electromagnetic spectrum. When they're not at a frequency, we call them gravity. And when they're polarized and not at a frequency, we call them magnetism. Well, whether yin and yang sucks is quite irrelevant, but whatever. Plus and minus is a real thing. If you want to make stupid comments, I'll just, that's you're easy enough to dispose of. So if you want to waste your time, go ahead. Yes, well, I think if you're going to start physics, it would be really interesting for you to watch a couple of my overview videos and the start here video and the second one. And then when you go into your physics instruction, I'm sure there's going to be points where you're going to say, there probably is a simpler way to explain that. Because the evidence supporting their theory is incredibly weak, and they never spent any time trying to make a particle theory work. They just dismissed it, and it's a 300-year-old idea, and it works for gravity very well, except for one problem, drag, and I've explained that. I've given at least one possible solution, more than one actually, but one that's really solid. Um, and they just didn't want to make it work. They didn't even try. And yet it covers everything else so well. I mean, a particle model does really well at explaining gravity. I mean, it's just a beautiful explanation. The whole idea of shadowing from force is just, the idea that any movement is the absorption of force. Anytime something's moving, accelerating, difference. Anytime something's accelerating, it's absorbing force. And if it maintains that velocity, the velocity gained through acceleration, that means it's kept the force and it still has the force. And that means the force couldn't have hit something ahead of it. So anything that has absorbed force in a direction has essentially absorbed gravity or magnetism. Um, it's absorbed impact. And, you know, and that is induction. If two things are absorbing, if one thing is moving towards another, this thing's solid and this thing moves towards it, this thing's absorbed force now that doesn't hit this thing. And then this thing will move forward because it's getting hit by more force from the back than from the front. So it moves forward. When it moves forward, it absorbed the force that would have hit here. Now that doesn't hit here. This thing moves forward. And it's just induction. So gravity is induction. So it fits right with Maxwell's whole explanation of magnetism. The two are really close. The only thing that's changed is in magnetism, you have polarization that makes the force so much stronger. All right, let's see. Can you explain the two-slit experiment? Apologies if you already did. Yeah, of course I already have. The two-slit experiment has nothing to do with waves or any of this other nonsense. It's just a bending of light by a degree amount. So if you know the math at all, there's a sine theta in the math, which they create through this whole Huygens bullshit that doesn't exist. This idea that each photon a photon splits into, creates little tiny wavelets ahead of it that are round, and then those round waves interfere. None of that crap happens. What creates the sine theta, what creates the angle that you just multiply for every location of the slit. So if the bars are here, 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 you're just talking about an angle, and you're just increasing the angle. You're just a multiple of the same angle. And so the point would be is that slits create surfaces, and the surfaces have electrons on them. And as you bring the surfaces closer together, you pressurize the electrons. So that's what makes for the change in the angle. But when the photon hits the electron essentially moves a little bit of its electrons in a location. When it gets hit by the photon, it moves a little bit out of its location and then pops back. And as it pops back, it releases the new photon at the angle it's popping back at. So it doesn't go out and then just come back straight because there's other electrons around the electron. So the electron moves in an arc and then goes back. And so now the direction of the electron is different when the new photon is released. And so that angle is decided, is just multiplied for the different locations. So it's just the movement of electrons. So if you hit two electrons, you can move, if it's say 3 degrees each time you hit an electron, it changes 3 degrees. So you hit two electrons at 6 degrees, three electrons at 9 degrees. Now, of course, you can hit an electron and go this way versus that way. So that complicates it. I mean, you could hit two electrons, one 3 degrees this way, and then you go 3 degrees back the other way, back to zero again. But that's all that's happening. It's just photons hitting electrons. Yeah, that was the last comment. So yeah, perfectly mechanical explanation, perfectly viable and sensible. Um, you know, it makes sense. And then the double slit experiment, it gets a little more complicated, but that's just a charge experiment because then you have a neutral in between. And so when you move the two slits tighter, you have a neutral in between essentially, and the two voltages end up being um, complementary. But it's really just about surfaces. Each surface will have a different um, um, electron signature, and therefore you'll have um, but they all have to be connected, because like I stated, electrons always share their pressure. So it'll end up being the same over all four surfaces. All right, what's the deal? General relativity. Like both relativities are shit. There's no, um, um, yeah, I don't know what Minkowski space is, so, but it doesn't really matter. I mean, there's absolutely no reason to tie space and time together. Time, number one, isn't a dimension. There's no such thing as the time dimension. Time is just a function, and it just exists because light doesn't travel instantaneously. As soon as you have any element in your universe that doesn't move from point A to point B instantaneously, then you obviously have time, because that's what makes time, is not the absence of instantaneous motion. And so the fact that photons don't move instantaneous means time exists. So it takes a certain amount of time to go distance. And that's all it is. There is no dimension of time. Morbid atheist. He's a little dicey on some of these subjects. We'll see. If the Big Bang happened, that means that it was a big push, not a big pull, so to speak, right? Who knows? I don't think it has anything to do with pushing and pulling at that stage. I mean, if it banged, it's a big explosion, which means a bunch of compressed stuff, a bunch of stuff that was compressed became uncompressed. It expanded. So it's a big expansion, but it's this expansion of stuff, not space. The space didn't expand, the stuff expanded. So it makes sense that the first force was doing pushing, not pulling. Well, the point is that matter bits can't be pushed into each other because they're full of electrons and protons. So atoms, for example, can't be pushed next to each other because the electrons repel each other because they reflect. The force between them reflects, and it gets stronger and stronger as you move them closer to each other. So, but even if you got rid of the atoms and all you had was electrons and protons, you can't smash the electrons next to each other, and you can't smash the protons next to each other unless you have them ordered in just the right sequence. So you have to basically turn them all into neutrons. And but that's as small as you can get. You can't compress them any more than that. Um, but the point would be is that somehow you have to have a big bang, you have to have pressure. You know, I like I said, I'm not going to defend the Big Bang. I think they have way too little evidence to assume any Big Bang. But I do have problems with it, in the sense that I don't know how you would compress all of this. You have to compress it while there's a lot of force bits between the electrons. So again, they can't really be in the form of neutrons. They have to be in the form of loose electrons or something, and that's what you have to compress to contain all the little bits that escape in the end. But whatever, I'm not glued to it, so I'm not too interested in origins or terminations. I think the real subject is what's happening. What's, like I said, unifying, as I put in the title, unification is the subject, not origin, and not terminality, or whatever you want to call the end times. I don't really care what end times are, and I don't care what created it. I'm more concerned with how it works. Hey, blonde computer. Well, that's not very useful, but whatever. I'm a Zoid guy. It's a little bit marginal. harping on origins. I think the last time he was here. Origins, origins, origins. Determinism and shit. Statistical mechanics. Somebody bringing that up again. Is the unification of let's see, thermodynamics and classical question mark. All I am saying is all I know of statistical mechanics is using algorithms to make predictions. So it's just taking bits of information and saying that you're gonna it's like taking the blueprint of a car and the blueprint of a bridge and the blueprint of the Empire State Building, throwing the information into a computer and then having the computer invent a fourth thing that's somehow a car and a bridge and an Empire State Building. It's synthetic physics. It isn't creating anything real. And so, yes, you could do it to, I suppose, verify connections between things. But again, I don't think it's the way to find the truth is to make, it's like dinosaur bones. They could put a bunch of dinosaur bones into an algorithm and then say, what's the average dinosaur look like? Is that really useful? Because it really won't be a real dinosaur. It might give you some perspective in terms of you'll get to know what the real size of dinosaurs were, or how they basically functioned. But it's probably just going to look like a lizard. It's not going to be that interesting. All right, it's about predicating how the individual particle operates within a macro system, question mark. I don't know why you're ending those things with question marks. You're making statements. So I don't know how that's a question, such as temperature, or whatever. I'm sure it's crap. So whatever. I have no, it sounds like crap. I think it's crap. You want to believe it? Fine. I don't care. Point me to experiments if you want to point to something. All right. But statistical experiments, I have really no interest in. Physics. I'm doing physics, really. I'm not doing made up shit. Uh, yeah, Piro is not relevant. I'm not doing the subject of determinism here. He did a silly video. Piro's video was just silly mush. We have a will, but yes, it's not really a will or anything. It's just a program. But we could think about it as a will, and we could think about it as being free, but it's not really any of that stuff. But we'll just call it that anyway for fun. I mean, it's baby talk. He has no clue. He doesn't understand the subject of brain at all. Um, yes, well, obviously they're all connected and they all happen in the universe and they're all made of electrons and protons. So, yes, it's all connected, but it's not connected in any direct way. So, it's just all silly mush. My consciousness is not in any direct way, any useful way at all connected to your consciousness. Um, and the biggest connection we have is the fact that you're actually hearing my words, and that's it. That's the strongest connection that could possibly exist. Are these photons at a frequency that are, flying across this medium into your eyeballs. That's it, and into your ears. But that's the end of the connection. The rest of it is so minute a connection that it's not worth mentioning. But again, the subject is not this wooey crap about, people who want to believe humans are special. Okay, go ahead and believe it. I mean, it's illogical. There's no evidence of it. We're clearly just mechanical devices. We're not doing anything more complicated. We're doing something slightly more complicated, but nothing more sophisticated, so to speak, than a fucking inchworm. I mean, it's it's just mechanical reflexes. We just have more sophisticated reflexes. Period. Do you believe in reptilians? Okay, I mean, you want me to block you? I will. So do that one more time and you're done here. I'm going to force you to retract that, actually. Retract that comment or I'm blocking you. I mean, I could ask you if you suck your own asshole. Do you fuck babies? I could ask you some stupidly rude questions. I mean, I can insult your intelligence. You haven't retracted it yet. Retract the comment or I'm blocking you. You have 30 seconds. Ding, 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 ding. I guess we're done. Okay. Oh, fuck off, Wizoid. Hide. Yes, you're done. Let's see. Is wanting to study the nature of reality good motivation to study physics? Look, there's some people who think philosophy is the major category and that science, okay, and then physics. Okay, but that's stupid. There's science, okay? Science is the idea of finding the truth. That's what science does. It looks for facts, it combines the facts, draws conclusions, makes new facts out of the facts it's collected. That's science. All right. And then physics is a science, and philosophy is a science. Those are different sciences. Philosophy, you have to use circumstantial evidence. You won't have usually empirical evidence for your conclusions. Um, they're more theoretical. Physics, you have more physical evidence to rely on. You're still going to have to use theory and logic to create new facts, but they're both sciences, okay, physics and philosophy. Um, one is about physical phenomenon, one is about um, the manifestations of physical phenomena, the stuff that you're not going to be able to see it as a force or as a cloud or as a shape. You're going to have to see it as an event. Let's see. Have you ever had a live discussion with Ken Wheeler? No, I've asked for such a thing. I've challenged the coward to have the balls to do it, and he refuses. He blocked me for politely asking, and a year or two ago, um, he's a coward, a despicable coward, and that's all he is. There's nothing else to say. He's a despicable coward, a fake, a phony, a fraud, a coward, an idiot, and he should be forced to man up. He should tell his viewers the truth that he's run away from debates. He hasn't won any debates. He's run away from them. He should be forced to tell his viewers the truth. He's a fucking coward. Okay, jetpack is useless drivel. Yeah, it's just so funny. Pathetic. Jetpack, he calls himself. Amazing. Condensed matter physics sounds interesting to work in. I don't know. I mean, it's a place where you're not going to get any, again, physical evidence of much. You're not going to be able to see your work, so to speak. So I don't know how interesting it would be. They can't really see the subatomic particles. They just can't. They see images left behind that are made out of the particle ripping through other stuff. They're photons being emitted because an electron travels through something and tears bits of it off, and those bits end up, leaving photons behind. I mean, it's you're seeing indirectly, very indirectly, and that's big things like electrons. You really don't stand any chance of seeing any of the compressed force. You know, and it all moves so fast. Once you get things under high pressure, um, any release of the pressure happens so quickly at the speed of light, you're not going to even see what the fuck happened. Any expansions and contractions are going to happen way beyond your capacity to perceive any of it. Yes, questions are appropriate. But questions on the subject of physics, and specifically unification, is preferable. And it's the 45-minute warning. I'm cutting it off at 10 o'clock. What kind of physics do you prefer? A bizarre question. I, I guess the obvious. I prefer theoretical physics, and I prefer physics tied to experiments that aren't made of insane number of assumptions. And even simple experiments, like the interferometer, is not all that complicated in terms of its mechanical parts. Yet it's been so misdescribed by physics, right? I mean, it's kind of simple. They call something a beam splitter, and it's not really a beam splitter. The ones they're using aren't. As I've pointed out, a plain piece of glass is a pretty good beam splitter. Just put it at a 45-degree angle. What do I need to put mirror on it for? A plain piece of glass splits the light into 50-50. Why would I mirror one of the surfaces if it already works without a mirror? And these questions aren't being answered by anybody. Well, that's because the mirrored surface fucks up the two light beams. Now one of them has been diffracted by going through the gaps in the mirroring, and the other one has been reflected. And one is diffracted for a long part of the path, all the way back and all the way forward, and the other one only gets diffracted in the very last section. They're clearly two very different beams of light. And yet we've been told that they're the same because we used a beam splitter and it splitted two perfectly the same beams of light. And it's a lie, frankly. It's just a fucking lie. The beam splitter doesn't split light, it distorts light. And so, yeah, I like physics that's based on real experiments. And frankly, though, physics can't do any because every experiment it creates, it has all these idiotic assumptions built into it. Look what they've done to the two slit experiments. Can't get any dirt simpler. And yet, when they do it with electrons, they assume electrons have a wavelength that they don't have. They just force the electrons to have one so we can do our math, our interference math on them. And they don't have a wavelength. How do you characterize the current state of online atheist community? Well, that's not on the subject, sorry. So I'm not going to bother with that. Beyond saying most atheists aren't atheists, they're religious kooks. They're all looking for magical answers. They're afraid of the word determinism. They're afraid of the word robot. They're afraid of the word addiction. you know, they're afraid to recognize that they're causing more friction than function. That they're all broken, shitty human beings, and they shouldn't be making any more of them. They're fucking frauds as atheists. They don't really believe in evolution. They think evolution is smart. They think killing 10,000 children to make one adult is smart. That's how dumb atheists are. To clarify, you say that a beam splitter creates the rings, right? Well, I'm saying that anytime you create a diffraction grating, as Piro forces me to say, you're going to diffract the light. Anytime you create a small gap that light has to go through, the light diverges coming out of it. So yes, the beam splitter is not splitting the light, it's diverging the light, which is creating the ring pattern. It's more complicated. Obviously, to create the ring pattern, you need internal reflections. And so all of the beam splitters have either glass in, or they have a layer of glue between glass. They have to have a layer that's next to a glass surface. So you have to have dirt or mirror or glue on the surface of glass to create the internal reflections, which are really creating the rings. But yes, the rings are created by internal reflections in the between the light as it transmits through the different mediums, it diffracts and um, diverges. So there's two effects, divergent and diffraction, and that's creating the ring pattern. Um, so if the rings are created at the splitter, you don't need mirrors necessarily to see the pattern. Well, you have to make it long enough for the pattern to be seen. Obviously, you have to have a distance, so you can't see this double slit pattern. If you put the target just a few inches away, you can't see it. So you definitely have to create enough time for the beam to be diverged enough to see it. So I think you do need the mirrors in some cases. Just depends on how you do the experiment. Just asking for clarification. Yes, well, I clarified. Never mind. Oh, interesting. So he asked if I'm taking questions, and he says, I don't have any questions. That's kind of funny. Um, but whatever. I mean, usually when you're out of your league, then you would have questions, but whatever. Let's see. Damn, I want to major in physics because it's interesting, but I hope I'm able to be aware of what bullshit and what's not. I'll try to interrogate my professor as much as I can. Yeah, you got to be careful doing that. But I'm just saying that, once you realize that, you'll see the parts where they're giving you basically what they're assuming, not what they've proven. And when you go to look at the evidence for why they believe something, then you can see that it's really thin. Like I said, there's very little evidence to prove that electrons spin around the nucleus of an atom. They've just assumed that it does. They haven't proven that it does. Yeah, it is. Physics is. I have found it very interesting. I actually failed physics in high school, but that's because my lab partner was a girl, and and I smoked a lot of pot, and I actually learned a lot in his class, but I was not very cooperative in terms of playing along, doing homework, and all that kind of crap. And it was kind of funny because I actually had it was the only F I got in high school, and so I had to actually protest it just because technically you're not supposed to get a failing grade if you show up, and I did show up most of the time. And so he had no right to give me an F. So I did force him to actually test me in front of the principal. And, and so when he tested me on what I knew about physics, I passed the test, so to speak. And so he had to concede and give me a D. But he was a little shithead. He was this little guy who wore a bow tie. He was just such a little fucking wiener. We really just didn't like each other. If you were a physics professor at university, how would you start your very first class in physics? What would be the first few things you would say to your students? That's just, I certainly would get to the push versus pull thing. I would just demonstrate that every pull has a push in it. Okay, it's just a manipulation of push. And that's a hugely important thing to realize that there's no attraction in physics. There's only the pushing force. And you can balance two pushes. You can balance a push by pushing out. So I can have a diving bell go way deep in the ocean, and there's a ton of pressure on the outside, and all I have to do is put pressure on the inside, and it's okay. Um, so you just have to learn that you have to pressurize things to balance them, and that it's imbalance that makes something move in the universe. Nothing moves unless something gets imbalanced. Something has to shadow force. Something has to absorb a force so it doesn't hit the other thing, and then it moves to the into the lack of force. And that's all that creates all the movement in the universe is a difference in the pressure. More force on one side means it's going to move. It's going to be pushed by that more force. But there's never anything truly attractive. There's just more force and less force. That's it. there's no negative force. Now, charge is a little different, but that's just a designation of two kinds of force. They're both plus forces, they're both positive forces. They're just distinctly different positive forces. And so you can have a different kind of pressure created, but it's still the same. The rule still applies. There's only more and then there's less of actual force. Okay, caught up again. There we go. Another one. If you place an electron in front of the south pole of a bar magnet, where would it move? Well, south and north I don't really want to play with, so let's just say south pole means plus. Um, then obviously the electron would move towards it. If the south pole is, there's electron force and proton force, and so I need to rename things. You know, the north side is the electron force, and the south side is the proton force. Let's say. Um, so you just need to make those distinctions. But obviously, the electron will. The electron is a monopole of magnetism. So clearly, it will be attracted to one end of the magnet and repelled by the other end. And attracted, I don't mean attracted, I mean there'll be an absence of pressure. There'll be less pressure. It will move into the less pressure. And on the electron end, they're both going to be creating force that's the same electron force. The electron's producing electron force. The magnet's producing electron force, and the two reflect. So the force gets stronger as you move the electron towards the magnet. So therefore creating more pressure, which means the electron needs to move away, or the magnet needs to move away, but one of them has to move away. The electron and the proton are quite literally the magnetic monopoles. Let's see, I've seen Gary's butthole online. Well, you haven't seen my butthole. It's not even, you know, there's lots of things that you've seen, but you haven't seen that exact thing. So, but more useless commenting by useless people. Goodbye to you. I don't know why they puts this thing on here, this the user did it, announcement thing, and it's like it doesn't go away right away. It's like, well, why leave that announcement thing in my way? Oh, thank you. Okay. Uh, yeah. So I think it's really interesting. I mean, when I figured out about a year ago that electrons and protons are the magnetic monopoles, quite obviously, and it really works when you think of them that way. The issue with a particle model is the disregarded the issue with a particle model is the disregarded that all these bits add up to a totality and that the bits were always a whole in the first place, only given abstract limits on their effect in, you're not saying anything, in finite space. So what? There's no issue with a particle model that you're demonstrating with this sentence at all. You haven't said anything. I've pointed out that a particle model fails if you don't polarize it. That's right. If you don't create charge, you don't have a universe. It doesn't happen. So charge, the fact that electrons and protons are different and that the force in the field is different. There's two kinds, electron force and proton force, plus and minus. That's why there's change in the universe. Without that, then yeah, nothing changes. But that's a huge difference. Tiny difference, but huge difference. But that's why there's a ball game. So your argument that there's no ball game in a particle model is bullshit. Of course there is. All you have to do is have the right turn. Once you have the right turn, 4 right turns creates a cul-de-sac, and you can trap energy in there forever. Fact. Big fact. Huge fact. Because can't get bigger. The right turn thing. For the morbid atheist, that's the other thing I get to right away. The right turn thing. Huge, 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 huge. Or left turn, or whatever turn. The fact that you could make a trap, you could trap force with turns, 90-degree turns, huge. And that's the whole foundation of Maxwell's equations, are that the perpendicular conversion of force. I think Fos, whatever that is, should integrate his professors about the fact that the electron is the magnetic monopole. Yes, well, I think it'd be a good challenge. I'd love to see a professor. I mean, I just don't know if he's going to know enough to be able to defend the argument to a professor. So I would like me to be able to interrogate a professor on why electrons and protons can't be considered the magnetic monopole, because I think I have the answers. The point is that the particles do not exist in and of themselves only in relation to one another opposing part of the whole. No, they exist in relation, the force bits exist in relation to the matter bits. So again, more nonsense. The matter bits is what allows the two different forces to interact, the red force, black force, plus minus force, and to do the right turn thing. So that's the nature of the universe. So these are not arguments. You're just making declarations. You don't have anything to back them up with. Role plays as a sissy online. Another useless commenter. So, say good night to you. All right. And once you have recognized the whole, then you're talking about fields. And then you get into this woo-woo ether nonsense. So again, I don't know what you're talking about. I don't believe in ether. I don't advocate for it. You obviously haven't watched my video. So again, to assume, if you imply that I believe in ether one more time, I'll block you. You're not making any arguments here. I've said nothing about it. I've said right in the beginning of this video, I don't believe fields exist. Fields are made of energy. They are not things that exist in all the time. And then all of a sudden the field, blah, blah. No, the field is made of force. A laser beam, okay, is a field when it's on. It's not a field when it's off. So fuck you. The police are here, so I don't know what that means, but I don't need you. Okay, I think I'll have to pop this out now, I guess. People are typing too fast. I wish that notice would not bother me. It's really irritating. Yes, pop the chat out. Thank you. All right. Let's see where we. Let's see. But what about the proclaimed success in applied quantum physics stuff? Well, again, you say, the proclaimed success. What? That's like the evidence for lensing. They give you a whole bunch of evidence that proved Einstein right. And if you go through each one of the experiments, you can find huge flaws in them. So all they do is talk big. They don't produce big. There's no evidence that they've ever predicted a fucking thing, okay, quantum mechanically. And they don't cite any of these great predictions. Again, Einstein's most famous prediction is so disputable as a fact. It's terrible evidence. Eddington's experiment has not been duplicated. It's garbage. It's junk science. And yet they claim that to be evidence of something. Are they doing bullshit, or are they getting an effect and misinterpreting it as the complementary quantum theory when not in use? They're just not paying any attention to the details and claiming they've got a great answer. So they keep claiming they have this explicit math. I've pointed out the math doesn't work in the double slit experiment and that they don't even count for the width of the slits. I've pointed out that in the single slit experiment, the math doesn't work because the pattern doesn't graduate. It doesn't flow the way it's supposed to. It'd be a sine wave of on and off. And instead, it's bars. It shouldn't be bars of light. It should be gradations of light and dark, and it's not. So their math is quite imperfect, quite incorrect, and they claim it's perfect, and it's done everything in the universe. Everything we ever have, my lemonade was made by quantum mathematics. Everything, the microphone, the pen, everything is quantum mechanics. Just insane exaggerations. All right. If it was a Physics 101 class with Gary teaching, I'd want my money back. Well, fuck you. Go fuck off then. Go somewhere else. I'll help you. It's not a counter argument, by the way. I mean, just all this lameness, right? I posted a video called Questions. All right. It's in a playlist. Any lameo who wants to make some crack, answer those 3 questions and then make your crack. So let me hear your answers to the questions pointed out, the huge flaws in your foundational experiments. Answer those, provide an answer for those huge glaring flaws in your assumptions before you criticize my physics with vacant statements. It smells like, your physics smells like poo. You're retarded. You're a fucking 2-year-old. You can't do better than that? You lame piece of shit. Look, you implied I believed in ether. You're saying right there in your previous comment about you're bringing up ether. You're talking, oh, blah, 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 all this jargon, and then you throw ether into it, shithead. What are you talking about? I didn't say it. You did say it. I said once you acknowledge the whole, which are all bits, are a part of, then you start talking about field. So again, I already made the clarification. The fields are excited in the sense that there's no fields. The fields are made of soldiers. The fields are made of bullets. Okay. And in this case, there's 2 kinds of bullets, 45 caliber and 22 caliber. And so they have a different effect. But I mean, there's no fields that exist as a static thing. They only exist as as we only see them when energized, in the sense that they have to be polarized, or they have to be at some proper frequency, or they have to be in some way modified to cause effects. But yes, the whole universe is a field of little bits, but they're going in all random directions. So obviously that's not very sensible to call that a field. I don't even understand gravity anymore thanks to Einstein. I'm very dumb. Well, whatever. And it will show. But to me, new physics is just math masturbation and not the actual reality of how things are. Well, math is important. I mean, math is a recognition of the relationships that exist between things, but clearly it can be distorted and manipulated. As I pointed out in the double slit experiment, they have this very weird, bizarre way of creating their one sine theta piece of the formula. And that angle is the entire formula. That's the deciding bit of information. The rest of it's uninteresting, almost information, distances and widths, and yeah, it's almost nothing information. But they create that sine theta with this idiotic notion that they split a photon in two, and it created 2 new waves that are waving through the non existent medium. And it's a whole bizarre, made up pile of crap that doesn't really happen. There's no evidence it happens that way. Zero. So it could be a perfectly reasonable formula, but because they think the variable is caused by a completely misidentified cause, you can sort of understand that the formula isn't really telling the truth the way they have manipulated it. What are your thoughts on the Hoffel-Keaton experiment? Oh, which one is that? I'm supposed to remember all these stupid things. Is that the stupid 2 steel balls smashing into each other or something? And the claimed connection of GPS by 3 seconds every year that followed. Well, again, I've already pointed out I don't disagree that clocks are broken by velocity. Velocity does damage to matter, no doubt about it. But it's not because time is bent. It's because the material bits are bent. Your matter is bent by velocity, and that bending means it doesn't work at the same rate. Oh, Christ, I've been over it so many times. So you're another guy who hasn't watched any of my videos. So, whatever. I mean, you have to put in a little time, or you're not going to get it. But there's no need to bend time to account for the fact that, as I've analogized, if you're dancing as fast as you can in one location, and then I tell you to move to your left or right while you're dancing, you'll understand you'll have to dance slower because you have to take time out to go this way. And the same thing happens to matter when you move it. When you move it, the matter was doing its thing. It was doing its thing as fast as it could. And if you're making it move, it can't do the thing it was doing as fast because it has to take some time to move. It's really that simple. That's the essence of time dilation. There's no dimension that's bent. The thing, metabolism, slows down. That's all. It's a kind of cryogenics. All you're doing is slowly freezing. Okay? If I make you move to your left while you're dancing, and dancing is your heat, you start losing heat the faster I make you move in a direction. If I make you move fast enough in a direction, you won't be doing any dancing at all and you'll be frozen. That kind of thing. Let's see. I'm sorry. I will try to watch more of them. Yeah, just watch the start here and watch the overview videos. They're in playlists. So if you watch a couple of the more recent overview videos, you'll get some of this shit. I have a website also. It doesn't really do the time dilation thing though, so I have to include that. There's really only bits which either accelerate towards stillness as matter. I don't know what that means. Or radiate at a frequency measured at a rate of c as em. That doesn't mean anything to me either. What decides whether that bit approaches stillness or radiates? I don't know what the fuck you're talking about. I can't make this any simpler. There's force bits. They all move the speed of light. They move in a straight line unless they hit an electron, period. There's matter bits. They have no internal motion. They have to be moved by being absorbing force. So there's electrons and protons. There's electron force bits and proton force bits. What the fuck are you talking about? You're not paraphrasing anything I'm talking about here. Force moves the speed of light. Matter doesn't. Matter only acquires speed by acquiring force. It has to absorb force bits. It has to have a disproportion of them in one direction to move in that direction. Yeah, fuck you. There's no question. Where's your question in your question, idiot? It is really a question that needs answering. What question? What decides whether the bit approaches stillness or radiates? Again, what are you talking about? What the fuck are you talking about? It has nothing to do with anything I've talked about. Stillness. What is stillness? What are you talking about? Forgive my ignorance, and I mean no disrespect, but if an electron is a monopole, the magnetic monopole, would that be a concession on your part that pull forces exist? How? Why the fuck would it be that? Again, you just haven't paid any attention. It's on the website, okay? I can't help you, all right? There's no pull. It's all push. Uh, fuck you. Again, I mean no disrespect. Well, I'm sorry. I don't see how this can be. I'm obliged because it's a magnetic monopole. I have to accept the existence of pull. I mean, again, where would pull come from? If there's no external pressure, things wouldn't move. There's always external pressure, and all you can do is create less pressure somewhere, and now you have push. But you have to take away pressure, or you have to increase pressure. But you can't. There's no pull. There's only less pressure or more pressure. How can I put this any simpler? Pull would mean something negative. There's only more and less. There's no negative pressure. There's no negative pressure. That means it can't be a pull. There's no unvacuum. Under vacuum. Vacuum minus one. There's no negative. There's only positive force. And then you can have an absence. You can have 10, or you can have 5, or you can have 3 force. But you can never have less than 0 force. So there can never be a push. Anyway, force is not physical. Well, again, I'm saying it is, asshole. How is it a bit? I just declared it that. That's what it is, asshole. It's a physical thing. Force is a measure of motion. Fuck you, it isn't. Look, you don't understand this conversation at all. Not at all. The whole point is the conventional notions are wrong, and that a real model made out of physical things is right. You're not defending your real model with this tripe. Okay, force is a measure of motion of matter. Wrong. What are you talking about? Well, again, what are you talking about, shit for brain? All right, you said this live stream that electrons are the magnetic monopole. You have to use the word magnetic monopole. So I'm just applying the definition of monopole that everyone accepts, you accept, except you accepts. How so? Show me this definition. Show me the definition of a magnetic monopole that obliges the existence of pole. Fucker. All right, if you're going to call me an idiot, you can just fuck off. Fuck you. I mean, you know, what are you saying? I'm obligated to think that a monopole creates less than vacuum pressure. Somehow, the existence of this north pole on the magnet means that there's a negative vacuum pressure, less than vacuum pressure exists. Somewhere that's in a definition somewhere as a law. They discovered it somehow. Somehow they found negative vacuum pressure. That's what you're arguing to me, that I have to accept it because physics says so. First off, physics doesn't say that, you fucking cunt. And second, even if they did say it, they have no evidence of it, so I don't have to accept it. And third, you haven't made an argument here defending your accusation that that's the truth. Where's your evidence that that's the truth, fuckhead? Force is an influence. Again, I'm not, your description of force, okay, is what's under dispute, shithead. You can't declare it, you have to prove it. Where are you proving what force is? Here he goes again. Force is an influence on a body or system. Well, okay, that I'll accept that. Producing or tending to produce a change in movement. Yeah, that's right, through absorption. You have to absorb the force or you're not going to move. Or in shape or other effects from dictionary website. And again, where does that say pull? Where does that say force works by pulling? All right, that's right, nowhere. Force does not exist without matter. It's what matter does. No, you're exactly wrong. It's what force does. Matter has no force. It has to absorb force. You don't think the earth absorbs force to go into the sun. You don't think a car absorbs, let's say, what's a better example? A space shuttle is absorbing the force of the fucking opposite reaction force from the giant explosion it has in its butt. You don't think that's what it's really doing. It's absorbing the equal but opposite energy of the explosion. One end of the explosion's going this way. The other end of the explosion's going this way, right into the fucking shuttle, shithead. Dumb fuck. Anyway, force does not exist without matter. Well, obviously, force can't be seen without matter. The whole argument is that the force exists without matter. Yes. Matter interprets force. Fuck for shit brain. Yes, he puts it in does. Oh, he's so fucking stupid. Does in capital letters. Fuck you. That's what's under dispute, shithead, and your evidence is lacking. No, it's a measure of what matter is doing. Fuck you. It's not have anything to do with what matter does. Force does it all. Without force, there's nothing happening. Yeah. Well, fuck you. You got no proof. All right. My 700 videos demonstrate what the evidence points to. And likewise, the evidence is on my website in terms of explaining to you the force between electrons and the force between protons that are holding matter together, you dumb fuck. Yes, I said before that it's possible primordial forces condense into matter, right? Who cares? But yes, of course, that it seems logical that the way you have electron matter, that is electrons, is probably because they had to be made out of electron force. Yes, that's probably how it works. Like corpuscles of force equal matter. Again, I just don't need to get into it, but yes, the point is that there's two kinds of force, and there's two kinds of fundamental elemental matter bits, electrons and protons. So there's electron force, electron matter, proton matter. And that's about all you need. What's your evidence of something is not physically existing? What what's your evidence of something that is not physically existing? What the fuck does that even mean? That is just as crazy as an unphysical ether. I, I don't even know what that even says. Fuck you. You're stupid. Obnoxious and stupid. I mean, it's amazing. These people, they accept all these idiotic notions that space is bent, that time is somehow a dimension. They have no evidence of any of this crap, and they just say it. You know, oh yeah, no, it's force just happens. You know, the Earth just moves because it falls into some magical nothing, a bend in nothing. Nothing is bent, and therefore something happens to something. Just such fucking bullshit. I'm not really interested in how I'm doing questions. Really wasting my time. All right. Let's see. His hair is a force that his scissors couldn't reckon with. Well, that's just so fucking interesting. Also, I'm gonna have to just block it if you keep it just wasting time. If that is true, it is possible that the big enough explosion could create new matter. Who cares? No, it wouldn't recreate an explosion. It needs pressure, so it would have to be an implosion. You need something to create high pressure, probably to create matter. Would that not be add to a new exception for the condition of conservation? Again, I see no evidence that electrons are destroyed, protons are destroyed, that force bits are destroyed. I have no interest in conversations about any of that crap happening because I don't think there's any evidence that it ever happens. I think right now there's atoms on this planet that have existed for 4, 5, 10 billion years, and they had the same force trapped in them that long. That most of the universe is made out of stuff that's been here a long fucking goddamn time. Also, you said before that matter is just force bits swimming around in square circles. I didn't say that's just what matter is. I said, quite obviously, I said it's made out of electrons and protons, and they're not swimming around. They're going between the electrons and the protons. I've drawn pictures of it. So again, if you're not going to pay any attention to the videos, then just fuck off. Sound like someone has some cognitive distance. Okay, if you're going to make accusations based on completely false premises, I never said anything about force bits swimming around. So I'm just going to block you. Fuck you. You're obviously not interested in an honest conversation. Well, I'll time out you, but I'm going to block it next time. So pull shit like that again, you lying piece of shit. All right. Time is not a dimension. Time is motion. Without time, there's no motion. It's exactly the opposite, jackass. Without less than instantaneous motion, there's no time. It's the other way around, fuckhead. Time is nothing. It doesn't exist. It's just a byproduct of motion being less than instantaneous. You're really stupid on every fucking subject, aren't you? Fucking Mars, jackass. All right, well, I guess this Hanson guy can just go fuck off. Irrelevant, irrelevant, and irrelevant. 3 irrelevant comments. Just fuck off. This is a physics conversation. It's not about vaping. It's not about my hair. Fuck you. All right. Let's see. Another fuckhead. Faith Walker. So that's a real interesting name. How could I possibly wasting time? It's been away for over a year and I come back and you're still talking about the same shit. Okay, then fuck off. You can't ask me to block you any quicker. You don't like it? Fuck off. Yeah, I'm talking about the same unification model. That's right. That's what the project is here. That's why the channel exists, you fucking retard. Jesus Christ. Not interested in love it either, with flamanges winking at me. Delete. I hate emoticons, so I'll just delete that because it's stupid. Fucking flamange. 5 minutes left. Let's see. You really don't want an honest conversation without totally misreading everything I've said. Oh, look, I've read your fucking shit comments, right? You don't prove anything. You don't demonstrate anything. Link to your evidence of something because there's no evidence of any of the crap you assert. You assert that there can't be a monopole without pole. I assert that is absolute rubbish. It's nowhere in physics. There's no obligation to create a pull force. If you want a real argument, I'd gladly present clear counterpoints. Well, you don't. Why don't you get a microphone and we can argue it out? But you're just talking shit. You don't answer any of my questions. This is what crack does. Okay, well, fuck you too. Jesus Christ. Jesus Christ, it's interesting. T minus 5 minutes. Thanks for the discussion. Let's see, any more experiment setups you're going to do? Yeah, there's plenty. Like, what is this spectrometer that you can utilize in microcomputers? Yeah, I don't know. Did you know there are some cheap? I don't think they're that cheap. I don't think you get a spectrometer cheap, but whatever. Show me the links. I said nothing about there being a push or pull. Well, you're just such a liar. You sat there and gave me this whole fucking argument that if there's a monopole, it has to be a pull. Wait, you saying you didn't do that? Ah. I like the Raspberry Pi or Adreno Moto. I mean, I'm not buying an Adreno to do fucking. I'm sure it's not a very good spectrometer. So you want to buy one, you buy one. I do have a microphone. I'd gladly talk to you. Okay, well, next time. We're out of time this time. So I'll send you the link to the room next time. You'll have to ask for it. I mean, it's not. I started both videos pointing that out. You just have to ask for the link, and I'll let you into the room. So you ask for the link. You don't have to barely load any software at all. If you use Chrome, it'll do the whole thing without you having to do anything, and you'll be able to get into the room. Well, you were the one talking about the same shit. You were talking about push versus pull, weren't you? That's where the subject came up. Anyway. All right. Well, I can always look over the chat later and see what the hell you said, but I'm pretty damn sure you brought it up the pull crap. Let's see. Time is motion. Yeah. Without time, there is no motion. So again, that's just crap. But anyway, all right. So till the next time. Yeah, recognition of a whole or whatever. Even that sentence. Do you think that makes sense to somebody? No. My argument was the recognition of the whole. I mean, what does that even mean? I'm arguing the universe is made out of an insanely preposterous number of little bits, and you're talking about some kind of whole. You're like a soup Nazi, except instead really good physics and other bullshit. You're like the soup Nazi? What the fuck does that even mean? Christ. People are so fucking strange. Anyway. Well, you say they obviously add up to something. It's like saying evolution obviously adds up to something when evolution doesn't have to add up to anything. Evolution could have stopped as it did in the ocean with the great white shark. It doesn't have to add up to something. To say it adds up to something, what? It adds up to a bunch of little cul-de-sacs of horse shit. It doesn't mean it's something. It's just silly. Adds up to something. What does it add up to? I mean, it's just stupid. It gets it gets dirty. It gets complicated. Yes, it evolves and matter gets trapped, and it just creates a bunch of you know opposite entropy. Until that gets wiped out. Just collects. It's just dirty. It just gets dirty. It's like dirty water or something. Anyway, it doesn't add up to anything. So, till the next time and such, and so forth and whatnot. So, it did take a half an hour to anything start happening in here, so I don't know whether I'll do this time again, but we'll see how it goes. Maybe, maybe not.